Welcome to the deep dive. We have something pretty interesting to look at today.
Yeah.
Excerpts from a spiritual lecture
Okay.
given just a couple of days ago on March 25th, 2025, by the Grupo de Fraternidad de Bezerra de Menezes in Curitiba.
Oh, wow.
And we're going to be delving into their unique perspective on Jesus Christ, Mary, John the Baptist, and some really interesting spiritual concepts they presented.
Awesome.
And as always, our mission is to bring those key understandings and surprising insights to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've brought something very specific.
Yes.
This is a unique opportunity for us to really look at one viewpoint from one group of people and really unpack their understanding of these spiritual concepts. And it starts actually quite warmly.
Oh, good.
The speaker welcomes everyone, wishes them peace, and really immediately states the purpose to learn more about Jesus and God to help them on their journey of reincarnation.
Okay, so let's start unpacking this. So we have the opening prayer, which is, of course, pretty standard. You'd expect that in a spiritual gathering. But then there's this practice of blessing water for spiritual healing, and that this water is used throughout the week.
Interesting.
And they even connect this back to the biblical story of Jesus and the Samaritan woman at the well when she asks for the water of life.
Right.
So how do we interpret the significance of this opening?
Well, it's pretty cool how they start by connecting some established Christian imagery with their own specific practices.
Yeah.
Right? They're blessing water. It's not just like
It's not just symbolic.
It's not just symbolic, right? They're really saying this connects us directly to the teachings of Jesus.
Yeah.
About spiritual nourishment. So I think for you, the listener, it really shows that they're being very intentional about grounding their potentially unique interpretations of Christianity within that recognizable framework.
Absolutely.
From the very beginning.
And then the speaker expresses particular joy for this date, March 25th, and links it back to the arrival of Christ 25 years prior.
Right.
So clearly they're centering the lecture around Jesus.
Yeah, they're not shying away from that at all. This date is not just a point in time for them.
Right.
It's this huge anniversary that underscores how important Jesus Christ is to their whole spiritual understanding.
Yeah.
So it really does set the stage for a discussion that looks at Jesus's life and impact through their very specific lens.
So the lecture moves into the conception of Jesus.
Okay.
And this is where we encounter a really unique perspective. So we all know the story of the angel Gabriel appearing to Mary.
Right.
But then the lecture presents this idea that the conception was actually like in vitro fertilization.
Whoa. Okay. So this is definitely a
that.
very different way of looking at this.
Yeah.
A very foundational event in Christian theology.
Yes.
And they go into detail.
They do.
They claim that Angel Gabriel brought the male gamete
Yes.
via pipette
A puppet.
from other spiritual spheres.
Okay. A pipette from other spiritual spheres. I love it.
Yeah. I mean,
This is great.
they're being very specific here.
They are.
And the reason they give
Yes.
is that Christ needed a body that didn't have animal nature.
Right.
Something that wasn't found on Earth at that time because humanity was not evolved enough yet.
Okay, so for the listener, this isn't just about a unique method of conception.
Right.
This gets at their belief about Christ's spiritual purity.
Exactly. It's just this core belief
Yes.
that he had to have this non-earthly biological origin.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And it implies that even Mary,
Yeah.
in her earthly form, couldn't have provided the biological material
Yeah, that's interesting.
that was necessary for Christ.
Without divine intervention.
Without this intervention from another sphere.
And so this also explains why she's referred to as the Virgin Mary.
Right.
Because she conceived in vitro by Angel Gabriel.
Not through the usual way.
Not the traditional way.
Yeah, exactly.
And then they go on to describe this incredible experience that Mary has where her room transforms into this celestial space.
I love this.
Filled with angels and melody and light.
I mean, you could really picture that. It's such vivid imagery.
It is.
And it emphasizes how extraordinary and sacred this event was.
It's not just a normal thing.
It's not an everyday thing.
No.
It's really meant to be seen as a miracle.
Absolutely.
Within their belief system.
And then there's a detail about the gamete
Okay.
being blue as it entered Mary's body.
Blue, that's a very specific detail.
It is. And they make this point that Christ's spirit wasn't confined there in the same way that a less evolved spirit might be.
Right. So they're saying that other spirits, when they reincarnate, They sort of sleep for a long time before they miniaturize to enter the body.
Right.
But Christ didn't do that.
Christ's different.
Very different.
Yeah.
So this distinction really shows how advanced they believe Christ's spirit was. He wasn't just any other spirit.
So this is important for the listener to understand that Christ's spirit is unlike any other.
Exactly. It's a fundamental difference in spiritual evolution.
And then they describe the spirit fecundating the first cell, and then Mary subsequently experiencing life in what they call the world of heaven.
Which they identify as the mind of Christ.
Right. So she's experiencing the world through Christ's mind.
Yeah. I mean, that's a pretty profound experience.
Yeah, it is profound.
If you think about it.
And this is where they say, quote, fact that nobody talks about.
Oh, here we go.
Mary is a spirit of the same high category as Christ himself.
So they're putting Mary on a very high level.
Very high.
This goes way beyond the traditional view in Christianity of Mary.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're basically saying that she was a being of equal spiritual stature to Jesus.
Okay, so then how does this connect back to the Gruppo da Fraternidade Bezerra de Menezes?
So they say that this Christic spirit, Mary, is actually overseeing the center.
Really?
Especially now that Dr. Bezerra is apparently reincarnated as a 3-year-old.
Wow, a 3-year-old.
That's what they say.
So he's not really leading right now.
Not in the same way.
Okay.
So we're also introduced to Ides Baruch, who's the spiritual mentor taking Bezerra's place for now.
I see.
And Dr. Edson, who is the clinical director of their hospital.
So they're bringing these figures into their present-day activities.
Exactly. It's not just ancient history for them.
Right.
It's like these beings are still actively involved.
So for the listener, this shows how these beliefs aren't just abstract ideas.
Right. They're woven into the very fabric of their spiritual center.
Okay.
It's all connected.
So moving on, the lecture talks about Mary visiting her cousin Elizabeth.
Yeah.
And according to them, Elizabeth was already 3 months pregnant with John the Baptist at that time.
Right. So we're back to the familiar story of John the Baptist and Jesus setting the stage for both of their births.
Yeah. So then we hear about Zechariah, who is Elizabeth's husband and a priest.
Mm-hmm.
And he has this encounter in the synagogue with a spirit.
Probably Angel Gabriel.
Right.
Behind the velvet curtains.
Yeah, it's all very dramatic.
Very dramatic.
With the velvet curtains.
And this spirit tells him about John's birth.
Right.
But Zechariah doesn't believe it.
Well, he and Elizabeth are old.
They're old.
And they haven't been able to have kids.
They're past that stage of life.
So, yeah, you can see why he might be skeptical.
You can understand his skepticism.
Yeah.
And then as a sign
of what?
Of his disbelief, he's struck mute.
He can't talk.
Until John is born.
Wow, so that's a pretty big sign.
A very big sign.
From the universe.
Yes.
Okay, so John the Baptist is 3 years older than Jesus.
Yeah.
And they grew up together.
Playing their homes.
Yeah, like little kids.
Yeah.
Running around, having fun.
It paints a nice picture.
Yeah, and they're described as being incredibly smart.
Okay.
Even as young children, even as kids. So they're both special.
Clearly special kids.
Okay.
And then later in the Bible, Jesus actually identifies John as the Elias who is to come.
And this is where the speaker gives their own unique interpretation.
Okay, let's hear it.
They say that John was Elias, but that Elias would return again as João Pessoa in 1857.
1857.
Who was a key figure in education.
Interesting.
And that Princess Isabel.
From Brazil.
Yes, and other European princes studied with him.
So they're saying that reincarnation explains this biblical prophecy and connects it to a historical event.
Yeah, so for the listener, this is about understanding how they see this continuity of spiritual purpose across lifetimes.
Right. It's not just a one-time thing.
No, it's a continuation.
It's a process of growth and learning.
Exactly.
And fulfilling a purpose.
So the speaker interprets Jesus's 2 statements about Elias has already come and is to come as referring to John the Baptist and João Pessoa, respectively.
Okay, so 2 different lifetimes.
2 different lifetimes.
2 different missions.
And they say that this signifies that all truths were finally established with the advent of Spiritism.
Which they call the third revelation?
Yes.
In 1857?
1857.
So they're really putting Spiritism as like the ultimate...
The peak.
The peak of divine revelation.
Yeah.
They're saying John the Baptist coming back as João Pessoa was a crucial step.
Okay.
In preparing humanity for the even greater understanding
of Spiritism.
Of Spiritism.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so now let's talk about this third revelation, Spiritism.
Okay.
The speaker sees this current time as a symbolic return of Christ's light 3 months after Christmas.
Symbolic.
Right.
So what do they mean by that?
Well, they're saying that Christ is like in gestation within Earth's energetic system.
Oh, the spiritual rebirth.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's this cyclical view of Christ's influence.
Right.
That it's constantly being renewed.
Okay, so it's not just a one-time event.
No.
25 years ago.
No, it's ongoing.
It's continuous.
It's continuous. Yeah. And then they introduce this idea of 3 testaments.
3 testaments.
The Torah, which they call the Old Testament.
Right.
The Bible, or the New Testament.
Mm-hmm.
And the Gospel, according to Spiritism, as the Third Testament.
Wow. So they're putting it on the same level as the Bible.
And they're saying that this Third Testament is special because it was dictated directly by Christ.
Okay, but under a different name.
The Spirit of Truth.
Spirit of Truth. So why the different name?
Well, they say that early books that were signed by Jesus were destroyed by the church.
Oh, wow.
So to protect Allan Kardec?
Who they say was John the Evangelist reincarnated?
Yes.
Okay.
They used the name Spirit of Truth instead.
Interesting. So as a safety measure.
Yeah, to make sure the teachings
Put it out there.
could spread.
Yeah.
So for the listener, Spiritism isn't just seen as like another interpretation.
Right.
It's seen as a direct continuation.
Of Christ's teaching.
Yes, facilitated through spirit communication.
And that makes it the Third Testament.
In their view.
Okay, so they then refer to chapter 6 of the Christ the Comforter.
Yeah.
Where Christ promised another comforter.
The Spirit of Truth.
Right? Who would remain eternally.
Forever.
Yes. And then they quote Matthew 11:28 through 30.
Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened.
Yeah, so they're using these biblical references
Yeah.
to support this idea that Spiritism and the teachings of the Spirit of Truth are the fulfillment of that promise.
Of a comforter.
Of the Comforter, yeah.
Okay.
So then they explain their perspective on suffering.
Okay.
It's about finding consolation through faith and divine justice.
Okay.
As taught by Christ.
Yeah.
And they contrast that with the despair of those who believe that there's nothing after this life.
Yeah, like this life is all there is.
Exactly.
Okay.
However, they say that Jesus' assistance comes with a condition.
A condition.
You have to follow his law of love and charity.
So you can't just believe.
You have to act.
You have to act accordingly.
You have to live it. Okay, so this is important for the listener.
Yeah.
This shows that just believing isn't enough.
Right.
You have to actually practice these principles.
It's about embodying those teachings in your life.
And they also mention that the gospel, according to Spiritism, includes explanations
From who?
from the same apostles who wrote the Bible.
Oh, wow. So they're saying there's this continuity between the Bible and the gospel, according to Spiritism.
They even say that John lived to be 102.
102.
Which is pretty incredible.
That's a long life.
That's a long life.
So they're basically saying that the apostles are still involved in this process of revelation.
And then they quote John 14:15 through 17 and 25.
Where Jesus is talking about the Comforter.
Right, the Comforter who will teach them and remind them of everything.
Right.
So this connection between the apostles and the gospel, according to Spiritism, really reinforces this idea of an unfolding revelation.
It's all connected.
Right.
It's all part of a plan.
Okay, so then the lecture turns to this idea of avoiding what they call the cult of suffering.
Cult of suffering, what is that?
So they're basically saying that you shouldn't dwell on Christ's suffering.
Oh, okay.
Especially during Lent.
Yeah.
Because they say that it creates more suffering.
Interesting.
So instead, they say, focus on the vibrant, eternal Christ.
Not the crucified one.
Right.
So this is a pretty big departure.
It is.
From how a lot of Christian traditions.
Yeah.
Look at this.
They focus so much on his death.
Right, the passion.
But this is saying no focus on the resurrection.
On the eternal life.
Exactly.
Okay, that's an important shift.
It is. And then they say that Christ endured 28 lashes.
Which was the maximum?
Yeah, under Roman law at the time.
Okay.
But that he did not die from the lashes.
Interesting.
And then they share this account.
An account of what?
A spiritual rescue of the Roman soldier.
Who was the executioner?
Yeah.
Wow. So they're taking a very different approach to this event.
They're looking at the spiritual state of the person who did it.
Right.
Which is fascinating.
Yeah, definitely an unusual perspective.
So they describe the soldier's spiritual state as having this infected throat.
What does that mean?
Well, they say that it produced the bacteria of falsehood.
The bacteria of falsehood.
Right, and they're saying that indebted spirits are used as laboratories to produce negative energies or bacteria.
Like the soldier was a source of lies.
Yeah, that's a pretty specific claim.
It is. It's an interesting way of thinking about how negativity and untruth spread in the world.
Yeah, they're not talking about like a physical bacteria.
Right.
They're talking about a spiritual...
Like a bad habit of the mind.
A spiritual bad habit.
That produces these untrue thoughts.
And these thoughts can spread and influence others.
Okay, so it's a spiritual contagion.
Yes.
Interesting.
And then the soldier had this vision of Christ's feet being lacerated.
Yeah.
And they were white.
White, not red.
Not red.
So no blood.
And blood was spraying out, but then vanishing.
Vanishing completely.
Yeah.
So they're saying that Christ didn't bleed.
They are.
Wow, that's a huge departure from the traditional story.
That is.
And they also say that some negative entities were trying to get Christ's blood.
They believed it had magical properties.
Like a magical potion.
Yeah.
Okay, but according to this lecture, there was no blood to be had.
No blood.
Interesting.
So the soldier, seeing no blood, was astonished.
He couldn't believe it.
Yeah, and it led him to believe that Jesus was special.
Right.
And then they make this claim that 7,500 people were bribed to testify against Christ.
7,500 people? That's a lot of people.
By the church and the Roman Empire.
So a massive conspiracy.
Yeah.
Go.
And they each got a gold coin, which was enough for a family of 5 to live for a whole year.
A year.
Yeah.
So they were well compensated.
They were. So they were incentivized to lie.
Yeah.
And because of the soldier's unusual report about the lack of blood, he was summoned to Rome.
To see the emperor.
To see Emperor Tiberius.
Okay.
And while he was there, he encountered his father's spirit.
Oh, wow.
And his father's spirit was in a state of zoanthropy.
Zoanthropy, what does that mean?
So it doesn't mean that he was literally an animal.
Okay.
It means that he appeared as an animal.
I see.
In this case, a dog.
A dog. Okay.
And his father threatened him.
Threatened to do what?
If he told the truth about the blood.
He would harm his family.
Yes.
Oh, wow. So he was under a lot of pressure.
He was.
To lie.
So he lied to the emperor.
And then what happened?
And he felt so guilty.
Oh, no.
That he killed himself.
That's so sad.
And then as a spiritual consequence, his throat became a source of this bacteria of falsehood.
For 20 years.
20 years.
Wow.
But eventually she repented.
Okay, good.
And he and his father went to another planet.
Let's start over.
To start over.
Okay, so even after all that,
there's hope.
There's a chance for redemption.
There's a chance for redemption.
That's a good message.
And throughout this whole account, they really emphasize the importance of truth.
Right. Your choices have consequences.
They do.
Even spiritual consequences.
Even across lifetimes.
So for the listener, this story is a cautionary tale about honesty.
And spiritual accountability across lifetimes.
Exactly.
Okay, so then they move on to Christ's final teachings.
Right.
And they describe the apostles being really despairing.
Before the crucifixion.
Yeah.
That must have been a really tough time for them.
It was.
To see their leader about to be executed.
Yeah. And Jesus explained that his suffering was fulfilling prophecy.
That he was the Lamb of God.
Yes. And then he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life.
Some very powerful words.
Very powerful words.
Okay, so they're revisiting some really important biblical passages here. To emphasize Christ's mission.
And his sacrifice.
Yeah.
And then Jesus again promised the Comforter.
The Holy Spirit, the Spirit of truth.
Yeah, and that the Comforter would teach them things beyond what they could currently understand.
Right.
And the lecture connects that directly to Spiritism.
As the third revelation.
Yeah.
Okay. And they say that it's still waiting for global understanding.
Right. Not everyone gets it yet.
Not yet.
But they will.
And they even go so far as to say that those who don't accept Spiritism are only half Christian.
Wow, so they're really emphasizing the importance of this.
Of this third revelation.
Yeah.
They're saying it's essential.
To truly understanding Christ's message.
Right.
Okay.
And then they talk about Spiritism's role in progress, justice, truth, purity, goodness.
It's the good things. All the good things.
Right.
And they say that those who don't learn through love will learn through pain.
So Spiritism is the religion of love.
Yes, as taught by Christ.
Right.
So this highlights the ethical and transformative
aspirations of Spiritism.
Exactly. It's not just about individual growth.
It's about making the world a better place.
Yeah.
Through love.
And then they share these messages from Christ himself.
From the spirit world.
From the spirit world.
Okay, so what do they say?
One message says, quote, I come as before among the lost children of Israel to bring the truth and dispel the darkness.
Wow, so Christ is still active. In the world.
And he's using Spiritism to remind people of God's truth.
Okay, so these messages are giving authority
There.
to Spiritism
Yeah.
by saying this is coming directly from Christ.
Exactly.
Okay.
And they say that Christ revealed divine doctrine and invited those who were suffering to come to him,
Yeah,
but that humanity has strayed.
from the path.
Yeah.
And they say death is not the end,
It's a trial.
a trial for...
We're cultivating virtues.
Okay, so it's not a punishment.
No.
It's an opportunity.
It's an opportunity to learn and grow.
Yeah.
And they caution against rejecting divine clemency.
God's mercy.
Yes.
Okay.
And they really emphasize Christ's compassion for human weakness.
He understands our struggles.
He does.
Yeah.
And they urge listeners to believe, to love, and to meditate
On the truth.
on the truth.
Okay.
And to avoid mixing falsehoods
With Spiritist teaching.
with the true teachings.
Right.
And they repeat the commandments, love one another, and instruct yourself.
So those are the core teachings.
The core teachings of Spiritism.
Okay.
And they say that all truth can be found in Christianity.
So they see Spiritism as a part of Christianity.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that any errors are human-made,
Not from God.
not from God.
Okay.
And then there's this message from beyond the tomb.
What does it say?
It says, quote, nothing perishes.
Nothing perishes. So there's life after death.
Yes.
Okay.
And Jesus is identified as the victor over evil.
And listeners are encouraged to be victors over impiety
Yes.
in their own lives.
In their own lives.
So it's about overcoming negativity.
Exactly. And then Christ speaks about his mission to teach and console the poor and disinherited.
He's still looking out for them.
He is.
Yeah.
And he encourages them to have hope.
To not give up.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then he addresses laborers
Okay.
and acknowledges their hard work.
Their work is important.
Yes.
Okay.
But he says their souls are not forgotten.
But they're not just cogs in a machine.
Right.
They're still spiritual beings.
And their suffering is forming a treasure in higher spheres.
Wow. So their hard work is actually benefiting them spiritually?
It is.
Okay.
And those who carry their burdens and help others are Christ's beloved.
That's a beautiful message.
It is.
So it's about service to others.
Yes.
Even in the midst of suffering.
And then they advise listeners to learn the doctrine that teaches the objective of human trials.
So it's not just random suffering.
No.
There's a purpose to it.
There's a purpose.
Okay.
And they say, let go of anger and envy towards the wealthy.
Because their trials might be even harder.
Spiritually speaking.
Right. You don't know what someone else is going through.
And they reaffirm Christ's presence.
He's still with us.
He is. And they encourage us to drink from the living fountain of love.
The living fountain of love. I like that.
And to prepare for liberation into God's embrace.
So it's about preparing for the afterlife.
Yes.
Through love.
Through love.
Okay.
And God's aim is to perfect even the weakest.
So everyone has potential.
Everyone.
Yeah.
And Christ calls himself the great physician of souls.
He is here to heal us.
He is.
Yeah.
And he says the weak and the suffering are his favorite children.
He has a special place for them.
He does.
Okay.
And he repeats the invitation to come to him for rest.
Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened.
And he warns against seeking fulfillment from the material world.
The world can't give you what you truly need.
Exactly.
Only God can.
And he says God is using Spiritism.
To what?
To eradicate impiety lies error and disbelief.
To purify the world.
Yes.
Okay.
And then they urge humility, submission to the Creator, and practice of love and prayer.
The divine law.
Yes.
Okay.
And then they say God will send his Son to instruct us.
Wow. So a second coming.
Yeah.
In a way.
And the message ends with Christ saying, "Here I am. I come to you because you have called me."
He's responding to our call.
He is.
That's powerful.
And they say God consoles the humble and gives strength to the afflicted.
If they ask.
If they ask.
Yeah.
And God's power covers the earth, bringing solace to every tear.
So there's always hope.
Always hope.
Even in the darkest times.
And then they talk about devotion and self-denial.
Okay.
As continuous prayer and profound spiritual learning.
So it's not just about denying yourself things.